extra, read all about it. Jesus cures the blind man. He drives out demons. He cures the royal official's son. He walks on water. And in that most amazing miracle, he raises Lazarus from the dead. Boy, when you put it that way, makes Jesus sound like a huckster, doesn't it? Well, I think we're going to be here a little bit this morning to figure out why Jesus is not a huckster. Let's face it, some people ask for a miracle. Perhaps all of us have at some point or another asked for a miracle, and sometimes they receive a miracle, and sometimes it is just the presence of Jesus alone that causes a miracle. You may remember the story of the woman who was hemorrhaging. Clearly, these are signs and wonders that Jesus is who He says He is. The question is it more? Remember, more? We've talked about that a lot. And Jesus seems to just wave His hand, and a miracle occurs. Something wonderful, something impossible happens. The leper is cured. Jesus has proven to us that He is the divine Son of God. So let me ask you, if Jesus had not produced a single miracle, would you still believe? Now, for lack of a better term, I'll call some of these miracles the wave of a hand miracles. Jesus, of course, takes them a little bit more seriously, but we should too. And nevertheless, these appear to be things that Jesus can do and we can't. Right? In the modern age, we still refer to miracles, but often these miracles perhaps seem more like just some kind of happy coincidence or a reflection of our delight in the world. When a baby is born, we call it a miracle. Is it? It's one of the most common things that happens. It's the birth of a child. Is it really a miracle? And I suppose for some, after one too many 3 a.m. feedings, we might sometimes wonder if it really was a miracle or not. Even after some parental heartbreak, we wonder, is that really what a miracle is? This, of course, is our 21st century confusion about miracles. What is a miracle? Because we don't really see that kind of wave of the hand miracle anymore. So we ascribe the delightful to the miraculous, which unfortunately can lead to doubt and disappointment when things aren't quite so miraculous. We can even apply with our wonderful modern philosophy these existential questions about miracles. I mean, didn't everyone for whom Jesus performed a miracle eventually die? Didn't they? Anyway, even Lazarus died eventually. What was the point? And sometimes we find ourselves within that existential quandary. Why didn't Jesus produce a miracle to save my mother, my father, myself? Is God arbitrary in delivering miracles? Are some favored and some not? Or are these miracle stories in the Bible simply metaphorical and they really weren't actual miracles, just stories of some kind of spiritual reinvigoration? I think what we need at this point, perhaps, is our quantum Jesus brains. The Jesus who wants us to think and act differently about our world and our place in it. Remember the quantum idea. Just as science had to act differently and think differently once we started talking about quantum physics and quantum mechanics, Jesus seems to be calling us in all aspects of his ministry to re-examine our basic assumptions about the divine, our association with God, and our participation in God's purposes. First of all, I, should not be so quick to dismiss the miraculous nature of the mundane. You see, as scientists have begun to think differently about the nature of the universe, one very consistent message, even from those who do not believe in a divine being, is the massive improbability that life could even exist at all. The odds of the universe just sort of falling together and producing life by accident are so minuscule as to be almost incalculable. Here's one example, or one statement that I came across. A scientist compared the odds of the universe coming together and supporting life by sheer accident as equivalent to the odds of drawing to an inside straight in poker. However, another scientist corrected him on those odds and said that the universe falling together by accident, the odds of that happening would be equivalent to that only if you drew an inside straight on every deal in every hand throughout eternity that you ever played in poker. The fact that we are even here suggests a miraculous beginning to everything, a purposeful beginning to everything. Well, that, I hope, would be a comforting thought, even at that 3 a.m. feeding when you're wondering about this little miracle who's crying and upset. Or perhaps more importantly, even at that moment of heartbreak, that life itself is demonstrably a miracle, therefore precious in all of its forms, and sacred simply because it is. Now, I have suggested, admittedly a little sarcastically, that the miracles of Jesus were basically advertising, right? Saying, I'm the Son of God and I can do stuff that you can't. Yet, Jesus often asks his disciples to keep his miracles to themselves. Particularly if you read the Gospel of Mark, he asks them to keep these miracles quiet. In other words, maybe he's worried that the disciples think these are just some kind of advertising, but I don't think Jesus does. And in fact, Jesus believes that his followers, particularly Peter, but others as well, can perform the same and even greater miracles. In other words, the ability to perform miracles isn't something that Jesus holds over his followers. I'm Jesus and you're not. He treats it as a gift that he can pass on to his followers. So how do we reconcile that with our modern notion about these wave-of-the-hand, advertising-looking miracles, the seeing the miraculous in the mundane? Okay, let's look at it from a different angle. Oh, wait a minute, that's what we're doing, right? Our quantum vision, we'll put on our quantum glasses. What if the meaning of Jesus' miracles isn't so much that Jesus could do the impossible? What if the meaning of these miracles were to teach his followers and all of his followers since that day that nothing is impossible? What if, now this kind of thinking, this quantum thinking on Jesus' part, might in fact be playing out over centuries. But certainly in our own lifetimes, we have seen things that as little as 100 years ago or even less were clearly impossible. And yet, now they are not. And each of us, perhaps, has seen this miracle in healing I certainly have recently. But when we see those kinds of miracles, our skeptics will tell us, well, that's humanity, right? That's just advances in medical science. Well, yes, of course it is advances in medical science. It was due to the advances of medical science. That really isn't the question. The real question is, how did those advances come about? By accident? Did they just sort of fall together? What do you think the odds are of that? Of a CT scanner falling together by accident? No. Some, 15th century scientist read these stories about Jesus and his healing miracles. And they read Jesus' invitation to be a part of those miracles. And they decided, well, I can participate in that. I could do something. Jesus has invited me to do this. So this person experiments with plants and herbs, and his followers over the decades and centuries keep that inspiration alive until one day we have procedures and drugs and CT scanners and everything else that would save a life that surely would have been lost just a few years ago. Why isn't that a miracle? I say it is. The slow-acting miracles that we participate in every single day. And I have to tell you, the recipient of these miracles, the one whose life was saved, couldn't care less if the miracle occurred last week or last year or 500 years ago or 2,000 years ago. Jesus said there can be miracles. And somebody listened. I think that those who are skeptical of miracles, or who perhaps don't really see the slow-acting miracles granted to us by God through Christ, they are skeptical because they don't see Jesus waving his hand, or because they imagine that something that is impossible today will remain impossible forever. I absolutely believe that God, for his own purposes and in his own time, may intervene miraculously with a wave of his hand in the life of our world. Yet, I can demonstrate that God most often calls upon his beloved children to be the instrument of those miracles with their imaginations, their sweat, their dedication, their faith to see beyond their own times and circumstances and imagine the fruition of a miracle in the hands of their children or their grandchildren or their great-grandchildren, knowing that God will be as present with them as God is present with themselves. In our reading today, Jesus seems to be questioning the royal official's sincerity when he says to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." What will it take for us? And remember, the official claimed to believe before the miracle that cures his son. And Jesus said to doubting Thomas, "Have you believed because you have seen me?" Do we as skeptical 21st century Christians require that kind of proof? Do we need to see Jesus and the wave of his hand? Or can we instead place our faith and belief in Jesus Christ, miracles or not? Do we need the wave of the hand proof? I asked you at the beginning of this message. Jesus answers that question as clearly as possible, again talking to doubting Thomas. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe. With our quantum eyes, we can see signs and wonders and miracles all around us. The wonder of creation, the miracle of life itself, the gifts of knowledge and compassion, dedication and faith. We are a part of this miracle. We can be the hands of God's miracles, not merely spectators passively waiting for God to wave God's hand. There are signs and wonders everywhere, even right here amongst us. Amen. Our closing hymn this morning is called Standing on the Promises.